Hello and welcome to another episode of TapCaf Transmissions. My name is Justin, joined as always by my co-host Corey, and today we are discussing for the first time on this podcast a comic book as we look at probably one of the most controversial pieces of Star Wars Legends media, the Dark Empire trilogy, and today specifically Dark Empire #1. Corey, how are you doing?
Wait, we weren't supposed to read Legacy this week?
Oh, you read all of them? Yeah, no, we were just doing that for fun.
Crap.
Those are just for our personal conversations.
Shit. Okay, I'll wing it. I've seen Rise of Skywalker, so it'll be fine.
Yeah, well, I mean, that'll be a big discussion point for today's video, I think. Before we get into the nitty gritty, though, do you want to do a quick checkup? We don't talk outside of these podcasts every 2 weeks, so
no. We really I think we do a good job of hiding the fact that we really don't like each other on the podcast. We're basically like the Star Wars Mythbusters, where there's like a small amount of mutual respect, but beyond that,
yeah. Or what Penn and Teller, I think, are like that way as well.
No, they're actually friends though. It was more like we're coworkers, but But we can talk more about other famous duo. We're a very famous duo ourselves, but yes. That's for our other podcast. Pals of I didn't think of a second word there.
We get the point though. But yeah, what's going on in your life? Is there anything big that's happened recently that you'd like to talk about on the podcast?
Well, for those of you who play Empire at War, we did release a new Clone Wars mod for it, Fall of the Republic, which Mr. EckhartsLadder has posted a trailer for on his channel here, so you may have seen that already. But yeah, that's basically been most of my life for the last 4 months. So it's going to feel nice to have some free time again. We should do this every week now.
Do you want to talk about like your history with Empire at War? Because I mean, a lot of people probably don't even know what the game is, or that there's like this big modding community. So in like 30 words or less, can you summarize?
Empire at War strategy game, Star Wars 2006.
That's where I was going to. Yeah.
I've modded it since then. I'm trying to stay under 30 words. I think that was close.
You can go. You can just free fire at this point. You did so well.
Well, basically, it's a Star Wars strategy game from the mid 2000s that has a very active modding community, and it's something that I've modded since I was like 13 or 14. If you are interested in Star Wars strategy games, that's kind of the place to go right now. Hopefully in the future there'll be some more options as well, but I can't go wrong with it right now.
Yeah, and so your first mod, well, was Thrawn's Revenge actually your first mod?
Yeah,
at least for Empire War.
Yeah, so the mods we're doing right now, Thrawn's Revenge and Fall of the Republic, are the same mods we started back in 2006. We took about 10 years off from Fall of the Republic before coming to this release, but yeah, so there's a lot to play.
So the release was like, we're recording this on the 23rd. The release was like almost 24 hours ago, like 20 hours ago.
Yep.
Midnight. So you're pretty happy with how things are looking and whatnot?
Yeah, so far it's been going pretty well. No super major issues outside of the first 5 minutes, which is nice. But yeah, it's no major fires to put out, which is always nice, and response has been really good. A lot of people seem to be enjoying it so far. There's going to be a lot of updates coming, so any small bug, like most of the bugs we've seen, have been relatively minor. So overall, I'm really happy, and I'll be able to sleep.
Well, that's good. You won't have to issue all those refunds for the free mod,
which you keep asking for.
I make that joke like 3 times a stream, but I'm assuming this is a somewhat different audience, so I can still make it.
That's true.
Yeah. Other than that, any big news in the Star Wars universe you want to talk about before we get into this because I think this episode will be a little bit shorter. There's a lot less content to cover.
Yeah, there's I think there was another Clone Wars related trailer that came out beyond just the Fall of the Republic one. Have you seen that?
I have.
I don't know if you keep up with Star Wars news, so.
Yeah, I mean, I've got like a Google notifications thing that I check like once a week. But no, I was never a huge like when the Clone Wars was first coming out, I think like a lot of people, I kind of wrote it off as a kids show.
Hmm.
The animation didn't do it many favors, and same with Rebels certainly. But I kind of went back and watched most of it later, and I really liked it. But I was never, and I'm still not like a hardcore Clone Wars fan. I've seen
Hmm.
every episode probably, but I'm not one of those people who rewatch it every year or whatever. Um, but the later seasons especially are really phenomenal stuff. So I mean, the trailer was great. I mean, we kind of know, I think, mostly what's going to happen, but the strides they made in, like, animation, I think, are really noticeable. Not only from, like, when the series came out, and I mean, there was animation progression within the series, but even from the, Star Wars Celebration trailer, I noticed
Yeah.
some improvements. So, yeah, I'm excited. Looks good. I wish it's kind of a bummer that's one last season, but
Do you think some of the stuff that we've seen like hinted at before during its years off is going to come in?
Mhm.
So like I think one of the most famous things for that is like the Bane and Revan scene, especially now with
Yeah.
the visual dictionary for episode 9 pointing or referencing
Mhm.
like Revan, Bane, and a bunch of other older Sith
Yeah.
from Legends. Do you
That's a
think
good
that's something
question.
that's gonna?
Whether that explicitly, I'm not sure. I mean, we do know that, like, because with the or the unfinished episodes, they were released. So we've seen a lot of what's coming in, like, incomplete form.
Yeah,
Um, but regarding the Bane and Revan thing, that's interesting. I would hope that they would take some time to um kind of dig deep into that stuff and kind of make some lore connections, because it's interesting. The Clone Wars is like one of the major sources of Disney Star Wars lore, or like the new EU lore, but it was basically finished before the new EU really started.
yeah,
So now they have a chance, which is kind of cool, to like bring in some stuff that they couldn't before because it didn't exist. Like in the trailer, you can see Caleb Dune uh, with his master, Kanan from Rebels, and that's pretty cool. So hopefully there'll be some other connections like that. I don't think we're gonna get the Yuuzhan Vong warrior that apparently Dave Filoni or someone scribbled on a napkin, and everyone was
yeah.
like, "The Yuuzhan Vong are coming in the next season, confirmed."
Well, what
But
about if there's like a scene where Anakin walks into Palpatine's office and he just like quickly hides a piece of paper in his robe and you can just see a scribbling of a Zeiston on it?
that would be fine. Uh, or there's some graffiti that says Mara Jade lives. Or
Pablo Hidalgo put it there himself.
no, I just it was really brave of them to have the first episode mentioned uh, a search for Jorah Sabayoth. Like that would be
He's a
whatever
character
happened
who
to that
really needs to be
guy.
brought back in.
I mean, it would have been really cool because, like, the Clone Wars, even when Legends was canon, the Clone Wars really didn't incorporate a lot of Legends material.
Yeah. Well,
Uh,
it referenced a lot of it, but it was like a lot of it was George Lucas's ideas, so
mhm.
there were certain things that he was more interested in just
Yeah,
obviously going his own direction with. But there was like Quinlan Voss was
yeah, that's true.
like a lot of the characters were actually things that a lot of the characters locations were things that
Hmm.
came in from legends before or other sources beforehand.
Yeah.
I hate calling it legends before because it just adds to the perception that the Clone Wars is not part of the Legends continuity, which it
Hmm.
very much is. But
Yeah. I mean, George, like, uh, it seems like he was going to tell whatever story he wanted to tell, and
mhm.
like he was totally okay with, contradicting stuff or ignoring stuff. But he did, like, you're right, when he saw references to something that he liked, like we get Coruscant in the prequels or Quinlan Vos, um, and there are other examples. He definitely wasn't afraid to use it,
Yeah, it's kind of
or to
like
use
bringing
Revan.
Coruscant itself into the
Yeah,
prequels,
exactly.
where like I don't see any of the contradictions being anywhere near as big as the ones we got between the previous depictions of the prequel era and then the
Hmm.
prequel itself,
No,
but
you're right.
or the prequels themselves.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Yeah, I mean, you're right. It's just there's a lot. There's just a lot in that series. I think it was Paulo who said that like the Clone Wars is like the most Star Wars content that George Lucas contributed to, just in like pure minutes.
Yeah.
So like if you really want to understand like how he saw the universe, what his visions or what his vision for the universe was, then that's probably a good place to look.
Yeah.
Have you seen the new apparently leaked script for Trevorrow's episode 9 now?
Yeah, I've seen some of the broad overviews of it and like some of the responses to it.
Mm-hmm.
And what do you think? What are your?
I mean, it it almost writes or it almost reads sort of like fan fiction, just because like I didn't read through the whole thing because I don't really care at this point. And we don't know like what stage that was in, what draft it was, like what
Yeah.
how far in they were. But I mean, there were some cool parts. Like there was mention of going to Kuat. There was going to be a lot of time spent on Coruscant, which I would have really appreciated.
Mhm.
I think it would have been a nice connection to the prequels. And then today, like I have no idea how this is happening, but a bunch of concept art for that also leaked as well for the older version of Episode 9. Some
Mhm.
of it's pretty striking. Like there's a lot of stuff on Coruscant. There's like a big First Order, like it looks like a mega Star Destroyer parked over the planet. Did you see those?
No.
They're pretty cool. Um,
Like my thing with a lot of leak scripts for like any project has always just been the there's so many more there's so much more room for people to fill the gaps with what their own ideas of what it would end up being like are.
Totally.
So when people hear, oh, there would have been Kuat or whatever else,
Mhm.
they're
Mortis.
going to fill in those gaps. And it's not like they ultimately end up with an idea that like, oh, this would have been so much better, when really you don't know
Mhm.
what it like. There's individual things you can say you would have appreciated, but for like I generally caution people against uh playing too much of like what could have been,
Mhm.
because had that happened and then had certain plot beats for Rise of Skywalker come out, is like, oh, they could have remade Dark Empire, this would have been fantastic.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
so it
It's like there's always, yeah, it's like the grass is sort of always
yeah,
greener.
anything that
Um,
leaves room for people's own wish fulfillment to kind of fill the
mhm.
gaps of what they think they're going to get, it kind of plays into the same thing that nostalgia can do,
Absolutely.
where you get this vague idea of like what you think you want, and then it you don't really know if that would have been actually better or worse than in
Yeah,
final execution.
especially with like concept art, because that's basically always like concept art is like the most pure idealized version of a concept. Um, and there's
Yeah.
always like feasibility issues or it like, concept art is almost never fully realized. Interestingly, with episode 8, if you look at the art book for that, the concept art that like Ryan Johnson had made basically matches scene by scene what happens in the movie. You compare that with like what JJ did, for example, with episode 7 and 9, and if you look at the concept art for those books,
Hmm.
he basically, it seems like he had less, not that he had less, well yeah, he had less of a vision, because like it's pretty clear when you watch a Ryan Johnson movie. Like I just watched Knives Out. He clearly has a vision, whether you like the movie or not, and he knows what he wants to do and he executes it fully.
Hmm.
It seems like JJ was more of the type of guy who would have kind of a theme he wanted, like Red Star Destroyer. That's one that he wanted explored for episode 7. So he's like, okay, to the artists who, this the Star Wars, like the Lucasfilm artists are among the most talented. Period. Um, so he's like, okay, Red Star Destroyer, give me ideas, and then he kind of, it seems like he works off that based on
Yeah.
what I've read from the episode 7 art book.
Yeah, and I think with JJ, what ends up coming across a lot is that you see all this excellent concept art and ships that would have been really cool,
Hmm.
but the in the end, it seems like he was just so afraid from straying away from, or not even necessarily afraid. It's just he was so attached to certain things from the original trilogy that he tried to just like lift them out wholesale,
Mhm.
and didn't want to stray too far from that, where that's kind of how you end up with a Zeiston being an 800-meter longer Star Destroyer with the underslung cannon, rather than just make a different ship for that, JJ.
Yeah, for sure. That was disappointing too, because there was some kind of wacky planet killer ships they made, or they had concept art for from episode 7.
Yeah.
And a lot of stuff from episode 9 you can actually find in the Force Awakens art book. There's something that looks a lot like Exegol. There's at least like a pretty barren planet with a, like some sort of large structure floating. Lando's vehicle, his tank, like his crawler thing, on Basana, that's like directly out of the episode 7 art book. And I think the triangular ties are there in some way too. So
Yeah, it's something that JJ does with everything, where it's weird that he ended up being the director to this. Like, it's not weird on a certain level, because it's clear that he loves these properties, or certain aspects of these properties, and that tends to be what he tries to emphasize, both with Star Wars and Star Trek. But something that he runs into with the Star Trek fan base is more that things like TNG and just Star Trek as a property used to be a bit more about being like cerebral, philosophical, whereas to JJ, he cared more about the visual aspects of it. So there were some complaints within that fan base for how he took the franchise that way. But he latches on to certain parts of them, and it to me, it just feels like he's more of a fan than should be necessarily making the continuation of those franchises.
Yeah, no.
And I honestly, I've never been a huge fan of anything, of any of JJ's work. Like, I don't dislike it. It's just, it's never been stuff that I've been into. So
yeah, like, I'm kind of surprised that they couldn't find a way to make George Lucas's original vision like workable under JJ as like a director, or under somebody else as a director, because it seems like, based on like what Bob Iger said afterwards, that Lucas wanted them to use his story treatments. He was disappointed when they didn't. So like, I'm kind of surprised that they didn't, keep with the maker and, Big George himself, and then have, control for those more questionable Lucas aspects that some people don't like. And then, you've got the whole thing. It's like, oh, this literally was a singular vision for 9 movies, and we've got episode 9. It feels totally like the actual end of a big saga. But like, and then maybe JJ could have directed episode 7, and then he could have, because the directing for that movie was great. The pacing, especially for the first like 40 minutes, is phenomenal.
Yeah, like a few Lucasfilm employees have said like a lot of ideas from George's drafts did end up in the movies, but kind of restructured. So really, without like, it's hard to know exactly what was used and what wasn't, and which elements George was upset about being included or not, or which changes George was upset about. But yeah,
thankfully today we're talking about George Lucas's original vision for the sequel trilogy.
Yeah, because everyone knows every part of Legends was what George Lucas wanted. He actually personally wrote Dark Empire and the Thrawn trilogy.
Can you imagine how mad people would be? Like, there's no Disney buyout. Lucasfilm announces a new movie. It's called something like vague enough to get the Legends fans excited. Like, I don't know, The Force Awakens. First trailer, it's Luke as a hermit. Jason and Jaina don't exist anymore. Some girl named Kira. Oh man, people would have been
like
really upset.
My biggest thing is like, anyone who thinks if Disney hadn't bought Star Wars and George had made a new trilogy, that it would have meant the continuation of Legends, is no. The best thing that could have happened for Legends is what happened, where it gets split off, and then hopefully at some point the stories get continued. But there was zero chance, absolutely zero chance, that they were ever going to turn any of the Legends expanded universe into movies.
Well, in the TFA art book, George apparently really liked the design of oh, it's Darth Talon. Do you know her?
Yeah,
The
from
Red
Legacy.
Twilight. Yeah. So I don't know if you've read the TFA art book, but there's a bunch of scenes with just Darth Talon in there, and it's like George really liked the design. It's like she's like a half naked Red Twi'lek.
Yeah, there are elements that George Lucas liked, but that doesn't mean he is going to
Oh yeah,
make
he
a
didn't
movie.
like the character. He just liked the design.
Yeah, which
Like a
yeah.
seductress.
Yeah. All right. You want to get into some Dark Empires?
Shall we? And there's a new element to this podcast because we have not only text to discuss, but also art.
That's true.
And from what we talked about beforehand, it seems like you're not super big on the art.
No, it's not that I'm not super big on the art. There's one aspect of the art of Dark Empire that I really do not like. The rest I like. And that is Luke
faces.
Skywalker's design.
Oh, just Luke's. Okay. And yeah, Cam Kennedy was like one of like a very prolific artist during this time. And I kind of fucked him around with Dark Empire 3 or Empire's End, and he was like, "Nah, I'm not going to do this." And those books really suffer, but I think you're right. The faces probably leave a bit to be desired, but it's a very like the art is very strange. It's like watercolor, or at least watercolor style. It's very like almost dreamlike sometimes.
Like, I like the overall style. I think it fits together really well. Like most of their faces, I'm fine with. They are probably the weirder part overall, but just Luke does not look like Luke. If you showed me a picture of Luke, I would not be like, "Oh, yeah, that's Luke." Like the last, is it page 30, I think it is, where he's like
of Dark Empire 1.
Of Dark Empire 1, where he's like they're walking away towards the Millennium Falcon and he's looking into the quote unquote camera with R2 beside him.
His eyes are yellow,
that doesn't look like Luke. Like there's no frame in which it looks like Luke to me. And I think I'm 100% convinced that they had a different design for Luke initially. Then they did Mon Mothma's and decided that they look too similar. Because every time I saw Mon Mothma in this, is like, oh, they fixed Luke's. Nope.
Yeah, that's funny because you mentioned that the other day when we were streaming, and I thought you were just joking. But then I was rereading a bit of it before today, and I was like, oh my god, like that is a way better Luke than Luke. So, I mean, conspiracy theory could be right. I don't know. What do you? I think the ships though work really, really well. Like I don't know. There's just a very cool aspect. Like he just makes so many ship types that they're Imperial because they look like a Star Destroyer, but they're different, and it kind of gives like a good scale, like a good sense of like how vast these Imperial fleets are and whatnot. The color does get to be a bit like, or like the lack of color, I guess, does get to be a bit like almost overwhelming at times.
Yeah, I feel like if these were longer, I would have been very depressed by the end of them just because of the color. But I think it's really good for the tone they're going for. Like visually, the series does like it gets across what it wants to really well. It's just it is such a dark series that like you just want to cry a little bit by the end.
Oh, you mean after Empatijehos Brand, rest his soul, after he passes on to the netherworld of the Force?
We shouldn't sleep on this. This is a theme that has been going on since the beginning of TapCaf, where Empatijehos Brand has come up every single episode. Yeah, and his time is almost here. He's not in this issue.
Guaranteed,
he's not in Dark Empire 1.
Dark Empire 2, yeah.
But we're getting to him, and then we're never talking about him again.
No, I'm talking about him every episode.
Nope, never talking about him again.
All right.
He needs to. We need to let him rest. He's carried this podcast for like 15, 16 episodes. I don't even know what episode we're on.
Yeah, I didn't even include it in the title. Also, did my title get messed up? I think
How Palpatine Returned in Star Wars Legends: Dark Empire Explained Part 1.
Okay, yeah, that would be right. That's a fun little insight for the podcast listeners only. Do you want to talk about like the kind of out of universe stuff? Because I think that that's really fascinating.
Sure.
How like the jostling between Dark Empire. We've kind of alluded to it when we did the Thrawn
Yeah.
trilogy, and we can also talk about the in-universe timeline, because there are actually no books between Thrawn and Dark Empire, right?
I think that's correct. There may have been something
Because like I
with
don't think
future.
Isard's Revenge is that's afterwards. Isn't
No,
it?
that is afterwards.
Yeah, and then it's Jedi Academy, I think.
Hmm.
Um,
Like as far as is Chris? No, there was is Tatooine Ghost before or after?
isn't it before?
I think Isard's Revenge is after Thrawn trilogy, and then Dark Empire.
Yeah,
I
it
think
is.
Tatooine Ghost is before thingy.
Okay, interesting. Um, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of a little weird because the universe changes so
Yeah.
friggin' dramatically, and it's in like months. The Dark Empire source book does like a pretty good job of trying to tie it together, but ultimately, these were like basically, we've talked about this before, but Dark Empire and the Thrawn trilogy were both basically options for the expanded universe to go in. I guess depending on which one was more popular. Um, and obviously the Thrawn trilogy won, and I'm thankful it did. So Dark Empire ends up being mostly just like a little very strange blip on the radar that's almost never referenced, despite the fact that it's like a whole galaxy changing event.
Well, didn't I think a lot of it just had to do with the contracts that Bantam and Dark Horse would have had, and
Mhm.
the extra amount of effort and money that goes into comic book production
Right.
compared to books. Because like if you look at the Corellian trilogy,
Mhm.
which many people would suggest you don't, the introduction to the book or like the dedication to it is the author basically saying like, I wrote this in 2 months, I'm not sure how I did it, it was on a train here, have fun guys.
Mhm.
And just the amount that Bantam could put out relative to Dark Horse seems to have been a big factor in that. But there was
Yeah.
some definite mudslinging between Bantam and Dark Horse, uh,
Yeah. You're right
especially
on the
between
time,
Timothy
though.
Zahn and Dark
Yeah.
Empire. But
You're right on the time too, because I didn't realize there was like 3 months between each issue of Dark Empire 1.
mhm.
And they're not long comics. They're pretty standard for comic length, but I think like yeah, one came out in be like January and then March or whatever. Um so yeah, it does take a long time. And then I think Dark Empire 2 didn't come out until 94, like the second set of issues. I don't think that came out until 94. So it definitely did take some time. Um, so what happened too? It's interesting because when you read the comics, at least the ones that I have, they've got the crawl beforehand, and then at the end there's like, does yours have like the notes sort of like it'll have like a topic of each issue,
No,
some key
mine just cuts
facts?
off at the last page.
Okay, so mine has like, for example, from Dark Empire 4, it's got 4 pages or 5 pages of just kind of lore, and some of it's really cool. Like when Vima Devoda comes up, it gives all her backstory and
Mhm.
stuff. Um, and the interesting thing is that is like there's Thrawn trilogy stuff in there,
Yeah.
and in the crawl too. There's a bit of Thrawn trilogy stuff. So what happened, I'm pretty sure, is like you said, Timothy Zahn just didn't want to include anything in Dark Empire in his stuff because he didn't like it. So Thrawn trilogy came out first, but it was too late to really alter Dark Empire in a meaningful way. So what they really just did was um, put it in the crawl and then in the stuff at the end.
Yeah, like the Dark Horse definitely blinked first.
Mm-hmm.
So like you do get a few nods towards events of the Thrawn trilogy in even Dark Empire 1, where it's like very vague mentions
The twins.
of the twins, like, oh, they're off
Yeah.
on New Alderaan. That's why no one's ever seen them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also clear that like they were developing their stories independently,
Mm-hmm.
and like because we're on Coruscant, and they try to imply that it's like the first time that we've been there,
Mm-hmm.
or that it's at least been constant fighting. Because Palpatine is upset about them being on Coruscant, It's like, well, we've been here for several years, buddy. Get used to it.
And they always call themselves the Rebellion, not the
Yeah.
New Republic. I don't think they just say New Republic once in the whole comic series.
Well, they also there's a very brief rundown, I think, in the first text crawl that gives a very different depiction of galactic events since the
basically had the Empire, like the New Republic, winning pretty quickly, and then the Empire slowly regaining strength.
Yeah, so like within I think it's like within months that they try to imply, like right after Endor, the rebels have controlled now 3/4 of the galaxy, and then it was slowly being encroached upon back into they're the rebels again, and controlling small amounts of territory. Whereas we kind of see the opposite in the rest of Legends. But you know where we do see a very similar story to what Dark Empire implies?
The entire sequel trilogy?
Operation Cinder.
Yeah, I mean, there are so many similarities between Episode 9 especially, but really the entire sequel trilogy, and I think there'll kind of be a running theme that we talk about throughout these 3 episodes, but it's really crazy because basically it's all the New Republic gains control, and then they're pretty quickly destroyed by an Imperial fleet. They become the Alliance again, just like the Resistance kind of becomes the last remaining element of the New Republic. Palpatine emerges from an unknown place with super weapons, and he's got new guards, and he's got we realize heavily on the dark side of the Force, and he wants to make a new empire. It's like on and on and on.
Okay, I don't think you can really, if you're trying to make parallels, throwing in that Palpatine relies heavily on the dark side of the Force is one you can.
Well, I mean, what I mean is he relies on dark side technology more than like the Empire. It's mostly military might, but the Dark Empire, all of his super weapons are like imbued with the dark side. He's got these these dark side adepts running around, and it's especially if you like look into the how the Essential Guide to Warfare treats it and how the Dark Empire sourcebook treats it, which makes it fit in with the Thrawn trilogy, I guess. It's basically right when Thrawn dies, Palpatine or the Empire sort of comes together and launches this massive invasion against the New Republic. Then it's later revealed to be Empire after they all kind of turn on each other in order to try to establish dominance. So there's like a bunch of the Empire comes together. They just launch a massive blitz on the galaxy, and then they basically fall into civil war because they can't decide which arm, whether it's Compnor or the Navy or whoever, should run the new empire, basically. So they kill each other, and that's kind of where things start. And then Palpatine's revealed.
So,
I'll just mention too, I've been listening to the audio production for Dark Empire alongside reading the comic. I know some of you guys were probably like, oh, he always listens to the audiobooks, but this is a comic. Gotcha. There's still an audiobook. Well, it's an audio production, so it's a little different. There's no narration. Everything is from the character's mouths, like a play. And that was created after the Thrawn trilogy. So when they're on Coruscant, for example, they're like, oh, we're back in the Imperial Center. I never thought we'd lose it so quickly. And there's a lot of interesting information. So the comic starts off basically with Luke and Lando had a Star Destroyer. They were taking it to, I don't know if it ever actually says why they were going to Coruscant. I think to do a hit and fade attack on whatever Imperial forces were there, but then it eventually crashes. The audiobook actually starts off with Luke digging through the Imperial Palace, trying to find basically Palpatine's old records, which I guess he couldn't find when they actually controlled the palace. And then he finds them, and it's like Palpatine is frustrated because he can't make a holocron. And it's kind of a weird way to start, but kind of cool, I guess, as well.
What actually happened is that when they took back the Imperial Palace, they got to Palpatine's office, and there was a "Do Not Disturb" sign on the door. So they didn't know who'd put it there. They were afraid it was like Mon Mothma's new office or something. So just no one went in. Mon
Mothma thought it was Bel Iblis's. Bel Iblis thought it was Mothma's.
That's why they didn't speak for so long. He was actually offering the galaxy.
That's reasonable. That's as likely a scenario as any other.
But another big character difference we get is that Lando and Han are probably how the comic intended it, still generals, whereas the way it happens in the books and with like further retcons, they resign their commissions, but now they're back. Yeah. But Lando ends up in command of a Star Destroyer twice with Luke, and Akbar seems to be very fond of Han and Lando, which is very different.
Also, it's like Wedge is second in command on his Star Destroyer, and if I were Wedge, I'd be a little pissed off. Like, Lando's commanding this thing.
You guys have been gone forever. I didn't even want to be in Fleet Command. Now here I am working for you.
Basically.
I do like how they highlight that, like, maybe I just shouldn't have a Star Destroyer after Lando crashes his second one. Or not crash, it gets eaten by a world devastator. But
he's like, I'm probably not cut out for this. And yeah, there's clearly a reference to, because he asks Han if Han wants to fly it. That's clearly a nod to Solo Command, which would come out later. He's like, I know Han has experience captaining large ships. I'm sure he'll be fine at it. A little bit of fortune telling there. But one thing that's cool about the audiobook is it talks about how Luke actually lands the Star Destroyer on Coruscant. He kind of like uses the Force to do a nice landing, very much like Anakin would do in Revenge of the Sith.
A scene recreated so well and so unfrustratingly by the Force Unleashed.
Yeah, basically. And Leia's like, she's like, if I know Luke, he probably took that Star Destroyer down on as many Imperials. Like, that does not sound like a very Jedi thing to do. Coruscant's a fully populated planet.
Han, remember the Gorman massacre? I think my brother likes doing that.
Yeah,
that is when Tarkin landed a shuttle on a crowd, basically. So,
just like that,
a little lore tidbit for people.
But I just imagine like all the fuel and the fumes and stuff just leaking down into the Undercity. There's like a whole generation of like creatures born with extra legs and shit now. Not cool.
Did Luke go like back in time and land on Terrace and cause the whole Rakghoul issue?
I think that's actually what happened. Yes. Yeah, I think that's basically it. Well, there is a comic that deals with Rakghouls, and I forget what it's called. It's like the Ancient Amulet. Oh, I can't remember. Have you ever read those ones? I can't remember what comic line it is now.
Was it the Republic line?
It was like a crossover because it goes modern. And then I can't remember any of this. This is it's got some Mekuduru stuff in it too. It's really I can't remember. The Mur Amulet. Yes, thank you. I can't remember what comic that was from. I read that ages ago. Mur Talisman. Appearances. Oh yeah, it was in Legacy. Right. Okay. So it did like the Kodor comics and then back in the Legacy comics, and basically it can turn people into Rakghouls, which is pretty cool.
That is pretty cash money.
Yeah. Anyway, so they show up on Coruscant. There's a massive, destruction everywhere. The Imperials have been hammering it out amongst each other. Speaking of, did you see the Dark Empire animation? Did I send that to you?
Yeah, I saw the first part of it.
It's pretty cool, eh? Like they capture the art style nicely. But anyway, they lose right away. Not only does Lando lose, or I guess that's technically Han's fault, not Lando's. Lando's crashed at this point, but they lose a Nebulon B because they crash it into a hulk of ship. And there's also a cool scene in the audiobook that doesn't make it to the comic where Han's like, we got to go back and look. And Leia's like, they're all gone. And he's like, how can you know? She's like, I can feel it. It's kind of like the first hint of her having some developing Force powers.
Which she goes pretty far with in Dark Empire, but also never uses again until like post-Vong War.
Well, she got busy with government stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, Luke gives her a few lightsabers throughout the everything. But the
She gets a lightsaber for one issue in this, and then gets crushed.
I really enjoyed the necks.
They are cool,
They're
yeah.
fun,
I like them too.
but
I like
not
all
quite as
the
much as I enjoyed the strange Humvee, like modern times Humvee that they
yeah. I
used
was
as
like,
their
"Huh,
main
that thing
ground
is."
vehicle.
I noticed that too. I was like, that thing has wheels on it. I don't know. I don't know about that. Um, but I guess others like the Juggernaut does as well. But all the ground scenes are really cool. Actually, like this comic does like that one shot. I think it's like 5 pages in with the giant. What is it? The XR tank and just like the TIE crawler and
Yeah.
stuff. It's just very like there's lots of cool like mechanized infantry and stuff we get in this.
Hmm.
So many new vehicle designs, some of which become fairly, well known, like the E-wing. Um, but yeah, then there's also a
A9
Humvee.
Vigilance, E-Wing.
Yeah, MC90, less so, um, but we get
One
even
of the
more
variants of
cool.
the MC90 at least.
Yeah, that's true.
But this was before you could just Google for a ship and trace
Hmm.
it into a comic book, so that's nice.
Yeah, they actually made one. But we'll get even more cool ground stuff when we have the next when we have Dark Empire 2, because that's when
Right.
I forget what the ground vehicles are called, but there's like that Imperial planet,
The
that Belmora, I
Vipers.
think. Yeah, I think it's
There's the
Belmora.
Belmoran stuff. There's the Vipers. There's
Yeah,
the
Attack on Biss or whatever.
mhm.
Um,
But this is fairly different from stuff we've seen before in just how it scales fleets, where
yes.
we get a depiction of fleets being much bigger than anything we've gotten in previous books we've covered.
Yeah,
Mostly
anything.
just from the fleets around Biss, where there's
Hmm.
like 37 Super Star Destroyers, 38 probably.
Yeah,
All
I
very
mean,
different, all incorporated in different ways in uh, various Empire War mods.
yeah. Well, there's a really cool one that no one has done anything with from the scene where this is it the Starlight Intruder when it's running towards Biss. There's a really cool Star Destroyer that no one's
Yeah,
handled yet. But yeah, you're right. Aren't you gonna do? Did you say you were planning a video on this, like the minimalist versus the
yeah,
maximalist approach to like world building?
yeah.
With like X-wing being very far in the minimalist. I guess Thrawn would be somewhat in the middle, but still on that side. And then you get like Dark Empire, some of the like legacy stuff.
Then way down the
Um,
line, you get Warhammer 40K.
yeah, yeah.
But how did you feel about the way Jedi are depicted and talked about in this, especially with respect to the Old Republic and the Jedi Order?
Right.
Because we get a
So
few
like,
references to what that's about, and it is a very different picture than what we get both in the prequels eventually, but also
mhm.
in some of the other expanded universe content.
Right. So you're like referring to how Mon Mothma says that like the Republic can't stand without the Jedi.
Yeah, so there's
Um,
that. There's the reference at the start to how the big thing that was stopped, like the big thing that kept the Republic together initially
mhm.
was the Jedi, which aren't there anymore. But we also get some more specific lore uh, in Dark Empire issue 2, where in the Mandalorian Imperial dungeon ship,
Mhm.
where Luke says, the kind they used to transport Jedi Knights during the Clone Wars. So
Yeah.
it's again this idea that the Clone Wars involved the Republic versus the Empire to some extent,
Yeah.
which we get some of that in the Marvel comics as well, I believe.
Yeah.
Uh,
There's
at,
like one issue in particular. Yeah. You're
and
right.
it seems like the assumption about the Jedi is that there's like a lot more than there ever was.
Well, I don't know. To me, it's kind of like in between what we get in like the Thrawn trilogy and even the original trilogy, where to me it feels like the Jedi are kind of like these not monks, but they're kind of just like mystics and warriors who travel the galaxy and do whatever. And then this basically says that there's a large order that helped keep the Republic stable. To me, that's really not that far off from what we get in the prequel trilogy, because
Mm.
I mean there are a lot of Jedi, and they're clearly, at least by the end of the Republic, very deeply ingrained within like the government. So it's not that far off, I guess. obviously the Clone Wars stuff is
well, their actual downfall and overlap with the Empire is very different. But
it also talks about Palpatine hunting Jedi. This is in one of the end sections. It talks about how Palpatine was hunting Jedi down and bringing them to him, and it kind of makes it seem like when they were still alive to try to find out how to access a holocron because he can't do it. Yeah, so that's interesting.
One of my favorite parts of the comics, I forget which specific one it was in, but in the latter half, I think, where Leia is confronting Palpatine. I think it's issue 4, where
she knocks his bed over.
Well, that, but where it's like Luke's gone, it's just her in the room with him. She's trying to kill him. He's trying to turn her, and she's like, no. She's like, okay, just help me into bed then. And she does it. And it's like, can you imagine in the middle of the throne room duel in episode 6?
I'm too weak.
Palpatine's just like,
like quick power nap, boys.
Yeah. Like, I'll never join you. Okay, I'm gonna take a nap then, buddy.
All right, let an old man die then.
Oh, if you don't want to join me, I'll just go to sleep over here.
This chair is incredibly comfortable.
Grant an old dying man a trip to bed.
Pulls down the blinders over the giant battle going on outside. It's too bright for my old eyes.
It's too. It is too bright.
But I mean, Palpatine himself is much different too. He's like almost demonic, where like there's a lot of focus on like stuff that was eventually dropped from his character, like the fact that
he died 37 times.
Yeah, yeah, and before Dark Empire as well. That was one of his more painful transitions, he says.
Yeah.
But basically his power is like eroding his body.
Yeah. Well, the one from Endor, that wasn't his first death. That was just another day on the job for all Wrinkles. But
what I don't really get though with that is if his bodies are eventually going to fail, then why does he care about inhabiting strong, like, why does it matter if he's inhabiting another clone of himself or if he's inhabiting Luke? Because why would a clone
have you ever seen Supernatural?
A little bit.
Do you know the whole Michael and Lucifer arc where they're... So these Sam and Dean are destined to be the vessels for Michael and Lucifer, and other bodies. They have other hosts, but they can't hold them as well because they're too powerful. But because of the parallels as set up by, I guess they think God has done this, but the show gets really deep in it. And I think it's a similar situation where Palpatine's clone bodies are probably worse for him than just getting a nice, inherently strong in the Force. Because this is pre-midichlorians. It's not that... So like the clone bodies are shitty, weak copies of what I'm sure was a very robust Palpatine at one point.
A very Chad body at one point.
Especially in the 90s, because it's like Xerox machines. Like you make the copies and they're blurrier and blurrier as you go. That's the idea with cloning, with clone madness. But but now if Palpatine can get into Luke, Leia, or fresh fetus Anakin, then this is the real shit.
I like how in Dark Empire 3, it's like, you're going to have to watch me when I'm a baby, though. Like, vampires. It's like, I'm going to be a baby for a while. Like, you guys are going to need to take care of me. But
get me the wet nurse. Yeah. We need to practice.
We do also get in Crimson Empire that Carnor Jax was somewhat... he was hiring someone to tamper with his...
Yeah, he was like poisoning all the bodies of the clones, so that probably contributed to the speed with which he was going through it. But it is kind of implied that the essence transfer was always going to be something where he was like eating away at the bodies.
Yeah. It's just like, to me, if he... I guess maybe his original body lasted far longer, I guess is the explanation. So, because like, presumably his original body could hold the power at least while he was getting stronger. So I don't know. I guess I'm overthinking this shit. Can we just talk about the fact that Palpatine hangs dong directly in front of Luke on multiple occasions?
Yeah. There's a lot of naked Palpatine in positions I didn't need to see naked Palpatine. Page 28, I think it is, of issue 5, where he's like just displaying directly to the camera while he's like holding his lightsaber out. He's got two lightsabers pointed in
You've defeated me in a robe before, but can you beat me dick out?
It's the strategy. I'm going to make another out of franchise reference here, but it's the strategy employed by Richard Hatch in Survivor challenges, where he'd just be naked so that no one would want to go near him.
I mean, yeah, you're not going to want to kill all of those. You're not going to want to kill all the cloning chambers if fucking naked ass Palpatine's going to fall out afterwards.
Yeah. Like, Luke just goes ham on all these cloning chambers. There's a bunch of dead Palpatines around. Haha, you forgot one. Now it's all slippery and wet in here with me.
At least try to cover up, Jesus. The dark side is a pathway to many abilities.
They just need a scene where, like, Luke grabs his old cloak and just...
We're taking a break.
Why couldn't you clone as many cloaks as you had bodies?
I do like, too, how he's got, like, a lightsaber rack that he just reaches over and grabs.
Well, you go through a lot of lightsabers in this place.
Mm-hmm. So, let's talk about the Force Storm as well.
Okay.
Because I think we've discussed most of issue 1. Everyone meets back up, and Luke's like, I gotta stay here because there's cool stuff on the planet. And then a big-ass Force Storm just comes and snatches him away to, well, some dungeon ship somewhere. And every time I read this, I thought the Antari 6, or whatever the name of that Nebulon B is, got destroyed, but it survives.
Huh.
Yeah. So I guess it's just Palpatine is being, like, suspiciously kind to that crew.
Well, when he's on to Susha with the Eclipse later, he's like, I don't have a quarrel with you, rebels, despite all the previous evidence of the Galactic Civil War. I just want Leia.
Yeah, despite the fact that he was, like, saying some not cool stuff about them earlier.
Yeah. I'm starting to think that, contrary to what Palpatine says, he actually doesn't like the rebels that much.
I think you might be right.
It's very subtle, but...
he's a nuanced character, so there's a lot to unpack.
That's true.
Like, let's talk about the World Devastators of Mon Calamari. And have you ever played the level from Rogue Squadron?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. That like I mean, it kind of goes against. So basically, for those who haven't read the comic, as Palpatine initiates like his blitz from the deep core, he sends these World Devastators to a bunch of planets, and one of them is Mon Calamari. And the audio drama talks about there being like 12 or 13 on the planet, just like ravaging it, just like crossing over, and just like basically they've got, it's called molecular furnace inside them. And this isn't so clear. This is made especially clear in like the source book, but they suck up everything, whether it's other ships or, you know, the planet itself. And not only can they produce more supplies, but they can also add on to themselves. So like World Devastators, and if you actually look at the comic, each World Devastator does look slightly different.
Yeah.
Some of them actually look like very different. Like there's one probably page like, I don't know, 15 or something of Dark Empire 2 that only has 2 of the repulsors or whatever.
Yeah. Like the ones on Dark Empire 3 page like 7-ish. They look probably the most standard. But then there's like the mothership World Devastator. I forget what one it's called. Like Silencer
7, I think.
Is it Silencer 7?
I think so. It's one Silencer something.
But yeah, that one looks very different from the rest.
There's some cool like lore too, because it's basically a ship like that can become infinitely powerful. It can self-repair. It's kind of like a Grey Goo type of thing because it's controlled fully by machines. The the Dark Empire source book, because I was doing a video on this, so I really looked into all of it. It doesn't explicitly say that one World Devastator could produce another, but presumably if it got large enough, I don't see why it couldn't. So they've basically made like self-replicating machines.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why they've got this big master shutoff code, because Palpatine's scared that, a rogue Imperial officer steals one and takes it to like an asteroid field, and then, next thing you know, you got a planet-side World Devastator or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
The Essential Guide to Warfare also says that the New Republic captured one, but they destroyed it.
Well, I think it's intended to be one of the ones in this issue.
I think you're right.
That gets disabled but not destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that was information that had been around before Essential Guide to Warfare, and then I think the destruction of it was an Essential Guide to Warfare thing to tie up that loose end. Because otherwise, the New Republic was flying around with the World Devastator, and I don't think that was what they wanted. So I think that's what that change was, or that reference was for.
If you're the New Republic, like, I know it's not very cool in the public's eye, but just go park it in an asteroid field somewhere. You got free capital ships for eventually, or at least starfighters for a long time. It's like the most useful thing you could ever capture, and they're like, just toss it away. You hate to see it.
Well, it's like a Roomba that's gone too far. You can't let that happen.
I've got two Roombas. One's a cheap one. One's got like the mapping feature. It's kind of creepy.
Do you ever tie butter knives to them and make them fight?
No, because they're separated. Okay. One's downstairs. Doug is downstairs.
Did you ever come up with a name for the second one?
Yeah, I completely forget what it is.
I saw the Twitter request for that, but
what's her name again? Doug is like the stupid one. Like Doug's crap. Oh, Selma. Selma's upstairs.
Selma?
Doug's downstairs. Yeah, Selma.
Like Simpson Selma, or was this something else?
It was like just Selma.
Okay.
Just Doug and Selma.
Okay.
But yeah, she like maps your house and stuff. It's kind of weird. And like she knows where rooms end. She knows where I sleep.
Even after Burial Cart?
Oh no. She can't go downstairs. I sleep on the couch downstairs after Burial Cart.
So I just saw something that I missed the first time that really stood out to me when Palpatine and the Eclipse are over Dasucha and the Force Storm is destroying the first Eclipse and it's like first outing. Real letdown there. But Palpatine's face.
Oh yeah, he's like,
it looks like he's either really enjoying himself or really not enjoying himself.
That's basically always Palpatine. But yeah, I kind of that's one of my favorite panels actually. Just kind of cool. And the Eclipse is a really cool ship. Mm-hmm. Clearly meant to be. I don't like how they retcon the Executor to make it larger. Well, it's not really a retcon, but like the Eclipse is clearly supposed to be like the next stage of ship.
Well, it's not necessarily the Executor being larger, it's longer, but the Eclipse is a bulkier ship. So there's a lot more tonnage there.
It's just like this was made when this was 17 kilometers when the Executor in the lore was probably 10 or 12.
Yeah.
And the Executor got the size up and the Eclipse never did. Which is kind of a bummer.
Well, sucks to
not
be
really a
Eclipse.
bummer,
but actually one thing that I did think about with the character art, since we brought that up at the start, is that the design for Palpatine as young Palpatine actually does look.
Yeah, it's not bad.
I don't know if they based it on pictures of Ian McDiarmid and that's how both of them became that, or if it was just like luck. But it looks like what we get for like Plagueis era Palpatine. So definite thumbs up on that.
Well, I mean, they probably could have just looked at because Ian McDiarmid. Well, I guess he would have been like in his. Still pretty young at this point, so yeah. Or they could just look at old pictures, I guess. But I do like how the first ship that encounters this massive... Sorry, I'm just scrolling through. When the Eclipse comes out of hyperspace with like the two massive Super Star Destroyers or Allegiant Star Destroyers, there's one DP-20 just sitting there. Like, oh, shit.
There's so many ships of like the... like kind of Corellian style. That's what most of the new designs end up looking like, other than the clearly Imperial ones. It's like a bunch of
Yeah.
Nebulon Bs, some on-cal ships, and then
Mhm.
stuff that is like definitely
There's a lot of like
Imperial or Corellian.
very DP20, like
Yeah,
3 engines, a square block, like an engine block, and then other sections. I mean, I like it. The fleet's a little more ragtag than like if I could change it, I'd make it less kind of like thrown together because they've been a government for some time, but
yeah,
it's still pretty cool. I mean, they got a big fleet too. You can see it like orbiting Dasucha, and it's not small.
yeah.
Like in that image with where the eclipse first comes out. That's a really cool one. You know the one where it comes out. I don't know what page it is, but it comes out of hyperspace. It's in Dark Empire 6. The one with the DP20, and in
Yeah,
that
the
you can
the
actually
next
see.
page, yeah, you can see a bunch of stuff going around the planet.
Yeah, and you can actually see on the eclipse, like the super laser. It actually looks like the ship was illustrated like it should have one, although it never uses it in the comics, and it was kind of just said in the source book. But it does look like there's like an aperture to fire a laser out of. There's like something looks like a big hangar in that in the illustrations. I think it's meant to be a hangar, the big red thing. But then there's at the very top, like at the nose, there's what looks like a big laser gun.
Yeah, for some reason I was thinking that it super lasered Pinnacle Moon, but
No,
no,
that's
that
it.
was
Gets
Force
Pinnacle Moon's
Storm.
galaxy gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know why I've always like changed that in my mind to be it using the super laser,
Hmm.
but it almost looks more like a just a weird hanger aperture, and then but yeah, the
The red
top
thing, you mean?
is
The top,
yeah,
yeah. Well, the red thing is definitely a hangar because
yeah.
there's
But I mean, just
the
like that's what the whole structure is intended
mhm.
for. But no,
Yeah,
it
you're
definitely
right.
fits with the later use of the eclipse.
Hmm. Yeah, I'll have to take a look at the Eclipse 2 to see if it has something similar.
All of the
I'm not sure.
destructions of the super weapons in Dark Empire just feel kind of underwhelming to me.
Oh yeah,
Like the
totally.
eclipse gets introduced, like, oh my god, this giant, oh wait, Palpatine killed it. And oh my god, the world dev, oh wait, R2 turned them off. Oh my
I like
god, the
the
galaxy,
yeah.
oh R2 rammed out. Like R2 does a lot of work in in
R2
these
does do.
comics,
Yeah.
but he should, you know how in Rogue Squadron there was all the big fuss about like who gets to draw the Death Stars and all the
Yeah.
fighters on their fighter, like the real
Should have just
world
been
kill
R2.
counts. Like R2 should just get like sleeves.
You know, like when Luke's firing his torpedo into the Death Star, he thinks he's using the Force. R2's just shaking his head. He's like, "God damn, this kid is stupid. I'm
when
controlling this ship from my end."
when Obi-Wan, yeah, when Obi-Wan tells him, turn off your targeting computer, R2's like, what the fuck's this kid doing? Turns it back on, fires it himself. Oh my god, Ben, I use the Force.
He's like, Ben's like, "Turn off your targeting computer." Luke just cuts him off. He's like, "Got it." He's like, "No, no, so R2 can take control."
No, it's just one more step in troll Obi-Wan, the pathological liar of the original trilogy. I
Luke
really
just
want to do a
ran.
video just going through every line he has in the OT and see what percentage of it is true, because I think it's under 10%.
Probably. I don't
Like,
blame Obi-Wan. That's all on George.
my name's Ben. No. Hello there. Where? No.
Luke, ram the Death Star. It'd be way more epic.
It's getting hypothermia, and we know Force Ghosts can interact with real world objects now. Luke,
It's like,
get your lazy ass up and go to the Dagobah system.
can I borrow your robe? You're a ghost. You don't even need it.
I must protect my modesty, Luke.
Oh man, at least that would have prepared him for Force Ghost Obi-Wan Hanging Dong would have prepared Luke better for Dark Empire. Um, just saying.
Ben, why aren't you wearing clothes? Don't worry,
Also,
Luke, you'll understand.
it's kind of BS because when when Obi-Wan dies, he doesn't take his robes with him. His body disappears. So you know when they appear in Force Ghost Heaven, they are butt naked. And then they
Yeah.
have to get because like they've got to get a robe from somewhere, I would
Yeah.
assume.
Well, when you get there, it's kind of like I'm gonna make as many references as possible. It's like when Goku goes to heaven every time in Dragon Ball Z with what's the guy's name, but like with the big mahogany desk.
Oh yeah, I
Mahogany.
forget that guy's name. Ah, I know
in
exactly
Star
what you mean,
Wars,
though.
they get a robe there.
Yeah.
And that's where you also get to choose your age settings. And Vader was the only one who managed to pick up the right way to do it. Obi-Wan and Yoda were too much of boomers to figure
out. Maybe Yoda is really young. He's like, Yoda's like, dude, I'm 200 years younger. You don't recognize it?
out.
He's like, ooh.
I'm a spry 700 now.
Back on topic, I noticed
How dare you.
so there's some weird stuff with Lando in hyperspace. And he's got the whole fleet next to him, you can see it. And they alter their course in hyperspace, and he comes out and fires on the Allegiance. I noticed that when he flies past the Allegiance, the ship looks much, much larger than like it looks like not a proper executor, but they call it a super star destroyer.
Yeah, the Allegiance.
And then later, when the Eclipse comes out in the audio production, they call the two ships that are escorting that, they call them superstar destroyers as well. So I think the Allegiance was intended to be much larger, because even when you see, I think it's in 3, when you see the just the regular ISD next to it, the ISD is really tiny.
Yeah, I don't know that they paid too much attention to scale with any of it.
Yeah, probably not.
I think the in 3 with the exploding one is probably the best sense we get from it, because of that being like the only semi-detailed one. But I'm not even sure if that's an ISD or the Allegiance behind it.
I think the Allegiance is the one that's right behind it, and then there's 2 other ISDs.
Because if I were to guess the scale for that based on that ISD being right there, then I'd probably put it over 4,000 meters.
Oh yeah, I would say like 7,000 probably, just because like look at how large the back end of the engines is. But I mean, it's hard to tell. I do like in that scene. There's a nice little detail. The V-wings, which are air speeders, are being carried down by like a some sort of
a bigger V-wing.
Yeah, it's a cool little detail. So I was wondering that like if I guess like last year when I was doing something on this battle, and then you look and yeah, they've actually, I don't know if it was intended for the V-wings to always be atmospheric craft, because they also in this have the sea vessels, so it's possible.
Yeah, I actually really like those skimmers.
Yeah, they're cool. They were in Rogue Squadron too, so
yeah,
like it's such cool. You don't really even though that's like one level, that's like a lot more integration with like comics and stuff than we got in the current canon.
It was like Dark Horse was over there doing one thing, Bantam was over there doing another, and then the Rogue Squadron game was like, hey guys, do you want to all hang out? I got X-Wings.
Droids in.
We can shoot some World Devastators, that's cool.
I mean, if you think about it, though, like that's a lot of effort for one level. That's after the game too, because they use the TIE droids. They've got all the World Devastator models. They've got the V-wings as a new starfighter. So I mean, pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So we're getting to the Props Rogue Squadron, Factor 5, I think, right? Is that Factor 5? I don't know. Anyway, we're getting to the probably the most controversial aspect of at least this issue, other than Palpatine cloning, and that's Luke.
Boba Fett. Oh.
Well, Luke falling to the dark side. What do you think? Or falling to the dark side because it's
lame and dumb. Because it's very unclear on exactly what's going on. His plan seems to have been predicated on the fact that he would get command of the entire fleet, which, if I were an Imperial, Vader didn't have the highest reputation. Like, that would have been a big no from me. And like the fact that like Palpatine must have known he was getting tricked and seemed to imply he knew he was getting tricked. It was just like everyone's playing 16D chess and just really badly at it.
Perhaps Palpatine, his ultimate goal was Leia, I guess. Like that's one option. But yeah, like it's unclear to like how whether Luke has actually fallen or not. because he's like, you broke me out of my spell, basically, to Leia. But
Yeah,
it's like,
but really, it was
on
saying the
other
whole time he
occasions,
was doing exactly what he
he
wanted
turns the
to.
World Devastators off and stuff. So it's a little strange. And I think some of the Vader stuff, like the fact that he kneels like right away, I think the Vader they do. I like the part where he comes out of the cave at the beginning of issue 1, or sorry, at the end of issue 1, and he's silhouetted like Vader. That's okay. But when he's literally wearing Vader's helmet or in like
In a
appearing
force
as Vader
projection.
in
Yeah.
force projections, that's probably a little bit much.
What did you think about the force projection where he was like trying to trick them to go away from Biss?
I thought that part was really cool.
Yeah.
Actually, I don't like how Leia calls it a dark side technique because
Luke does it again in not just The Last Jedi, but it's like it ends up being, is that one of the Fallen Aussie techniques?
Yeah, yeah, he does that with like his ship a bunch of times too.
Yeah.
And he makes a fleet on one occasion. He hides the Falcon a couple times. I think that's like the White Current, maybe.
Right. Because Fallen Aussie were flow walking.
No, flow walking was the Ang T, wasn't it?
Ang T did projections. Because they could do instant transmission.
No, yeah.
There's a bunch of weird, but yeah,
flow walking
he
was
does
the
it
Ang
other
T,
times.
and the Fallen Aussie were like the White Current with their projections mostly.
Mm-hmm.
Because I remember in they go to what's the planet with the they go to Nam Chorios in Fate of the Jedi, and there's basically a giant force projection which is making everyone on the planet think they're sick with the
Abeloth fever.
Sort of, but it's actually Abeloth partnering with that Fallen Aussie woman. I always forget her name, and she's making them think that they've got the some sort of illness. I can't remember exactly what, but yeah. So it is kind of like that. I mean, it's not unlike flow walking as well. It's kind of like a mixture of everything.
But I've always liked the force projection technique thing.
Yeah,
I think there's a few places that it's been used in interesting ways. So it's one of my favorite kind of obscure force thingies.
And Rian Johnson, like after The Last Jedi came out, a few months after, he like posted a video and it was him in his office. It's like went up to this bookshelf, went to like the highest level, reached up, grabbed a Star Wars book. I don't know if it was like a West End Games book or something, opened it up and there was like a description of force projection. So he had at least read about it before.
Yeah.
The other than, of course, there's the scene in issue 1 too that's kind of like the reverse of what happens in The Last Jedi with the walkers, where he does stare one down, like shields himself from the blast and then crushes it.
Well, it's kind of, I think that's kind of set up to be like, look at how far he's come since episode 5. Whereas like, oh, he had to strap himself up there and slice. Yeah, and now he can just crush it. But
mortal stuff.
The thing I disliked most with the turn to the dark side was the prophecy.
Oh yeah, that's so cheesy.
The one
so
that was
on
like
the goddamn nose.
Yeah, it's extremely explicit of exactly what's going to happen. It's like a grade 5 student's attempt at poetry.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, so when Anakin shows up in the Jedi temple, we're like, oh, the prophecy of the chosen one? No, the prophecy about the fucking Skywalkers. That prophecy.
True. And also, the prophecy of the chosen one's like somewhat difficult to interpret. And I just imagine that it's like just as blunt as the one in this, which says like it's just like a kid named Anakin will come. Make sure you train him well. Like,
an Anakin is sandy haired as the place he comes from.
Like, what does this mean?
Will be presented to Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan.
No. This says Obi-Wan. There's an O there. This can't be right.
There's actually just an entire hall in the Jedi Temple dedicated to Skywalker-related prophecies.
Well, there's another one too. In one of the Old Republic comics. What's that? I keep forgetting comic shit today. I hardly ever read them, but there's the group of Jedi who get visions. And one of them does have a vision of Luke and Vader and others. So these Skywalkers have been like the galaxy should have known that they were around for quite a while, but
They're just bad news.
yeah, just not good. Bad shit.
But Boba Fett. Boba Fett where? How do you feel?
Yeah. I don't really care. I mean, I really like it. Nal Hutta is such a cool. I mean, it's just a distraction, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a really cool planet visually. Like, especially the first scene where like they come out. Or I guess they're on Nar Shaddaa technically, but the first scene where they come out, like, in the skyline is there, and the huge planets in the background, and you can see like the wreck of an old fire spray. Like,
Yeah,
that's really cool. That's in issue 3.
well, there's a lot of basically every planet they go to is like surrounded in debris from the constant fighting.
Mm-hmm.
Very densely too, so that's the other part of the maximalist.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, but they, even though it is very maximalist, they still encounter everybody that they know. It's like Dengar and shit.
Well, Dengar was just some unnamed dude at this point, right? He'd never shown up in anything, and then he just got like Bounty Hunter Trilogy.
Yeah, I mean, he had been. Well, Dengar gets killed in the Thrawn trilogy, so it's kind of weird. Because, do you know? Are you like familiar with this retcon? I meant to talk about it. I think it's in.
I don't.
Okay, so there's a character. What's his name? Dengar Roth, I think it is. Oh yeah. So there's a character named Dengar Roth in the Thrawn trilogy, who's after Leia, remember the guy who traps Mara Jade on Rishi, who kind of tricks her, and then she kills him.
Mm-hmm.
She like topples. I think she topples like a crate on him or something. She takes his ID and it says Dengar Roth.
Okay, right.
And that was supposed to be Dengar. So
I noticed the name being the same, but I didn't think it was intended to be the same guy.
Yeah, so this is a little bit more complicated because there's a new character made for the Rise of Skywalker called Rothgar Dang, who looks like he's just a character in the background. He's got what looks like Dengar's armor, and it says, here's what Wikipedia says about him. Rothgar Dang, possibly operating under an alias, was a Corellian bounty hunter, just like Dengar, who, by the time of the war between the First Order and Resistance, was old and experienced. Deng subjugated himself to cybernetic replacements and turned to black market surgical clinics to replace damaged body parts. So, the conspiracy theory on the internet is that this is Dengar just having, screwed himself up, and he's like really weird looking if you look him up. And the whole Rothgar thing is kind of an homage to the Thrawn trilogy in a way, but also kind of a hint that they're the same character.
Yeah. Well, there's also like he's in episode 5 just as background dude, but I'm not sure. He's always had a weird storyline though, because like his retiring and coming out of retirement from all the different sources, and then I guess now he's died twice. So,
well, the thing, yeah. So the Thrawn trilogy, I don't know what it was, but eventually he was made into a completely different character. Yeah. Dengar Roth ended up being a completely different
just a
character.
Guy who gets killed.
Yeah, Gunnar Groth, alias Dengar Roth. So it's like, yeah.
His name was Gunnar, and he changed his nickname to Dengar.
Yeah, what the hell?
That was already a great name. You don't need a nickname.
Yeah, seriously. But yeah, so that's a little bit of a interesting connection there. I don't
Well,
know.
it does get to one of the problems that I do have with Dark Empire, at least up to this point,
Hmm.
which you can kind of make the same point about The Force Awakens, where
Hmm.
it's all just forcing in established characters.
Yeah,
Do we get like 2 or 3 new ones from like Han's friends on Nar
and
Shaddaa?
Sala, and yeah,
But throughout the entire 6 issues, everyone else we've seen before. And I guess Titus
yeah.
Clev as, I don't know if he actually got named in this, but I don't know that really
I don't
anyone
think
else
so.
with a name comes out of it directly. It's like they're
Yeah,
afraid
we get a
you.
lot more in Dark Empire
Yeah, because you
too.
get into like Empatigeos, you get like Cam
You
comes up
get
earlier.
the yeah, and you
Uh,
get the executors and stuff.
yeah, but for this one, it's like it's very much just greatest hits family reunion of Star Wars, the original trilogy.
I'm okay with it though because the story is just so weird. You know what I mean?
You
Like
need some
it's
kind of
so
grounding for
different.
it.
Yeah, exactly. Um, like I do think the bounty hunting bit is a bit much. I think it would have been fine to just even
Like, do we
just
need
Boba
Dengar and
Fett.
Boba? Yeah, just
Yeah, just Boba Fett would have been fine.
do we need their like sassy back talk to each other?
Yeah, exactly.
You can't fly. Oh, you. This is the last time I ever work with you.
I'm
No one
gonna
ever knows we
murder
worked
you
together
after
before.
this. What do you think of Vima? She's another new character.
uh,
Long
I
descendant of Nomi Sun Rider.
yeah. So I like her individually, but it kind of
There's a
gets to
lot
the
of Jedi.
whole yeah. It kind of gets to the whole idea of like how common are Jedi right now,
Hmm.
and she was clearly not hiding very well. So,
Yeah, because Leia could sense her, so
which isn't a criticism of her, it's
no.
just and she's probably like she wants Leia to find her,
Hmm.
but it ties too much into the whole prophecy side of it
Yeah.
that I just find kind of lame. Is that that's why she would want to expose herself to Leia, because she knows that she's going to do all this crap. And I don't know, maybe that's me like putting too much onto it, but
Hmm. We'll say last time a street urchin on Nar Shaddaa exposed themselves to me, it wasn't nearly as nice of a interaction.
hmm, does that
What's the
happen
name
often?
of all the time? Every time I go. What's the name of the alien in the holocron again? Because
Uh, Boom.
it's
Fuck.
Boda, isn't it? Like there's two characters that have Boda in their name.
Yeah,
It's just
it's
kind of
but
weird.
there's two names. Bodo Cass or
Okay,
something.
yeah.
It
Is it the same one that's
is
in the Jedi Academy trilogy as well?
Bodo Bass. But yeah, the slimiest one.
Yeah. Is he the one that's in the Jedi Academy trilogy as well?
Bodo Bass?
Yeah, like because don't they get teachings from the holocron?
The name I made me think that, but I don't remember him being like
Hmm.
wrinkly congealed slug guy, which
See that's the part that I did remember. I remembered him being because I read it like when I
okay,
was
so you remember the slug guy, I remember the name. I'm willing to say they're the same person then.
yeah, okay. um because Jedi Academy trilogy does actually have it's probably the most Dark Empire tied
Yeah.
um
Well, the Sun
thing
Crusher is
in
very
the
much a Dark Empire super weapon type, and then the Death Star prototype and everything.
and they go to when they go to Mon Calamari, we get references to the dark like
Hmm.
to Palpatine's sieges, unlike Coruscant, which is repaired overnight.
Well, uh, Kevin Anderson is like he's got his fingers in all
Hmm.
the EU pots. Only probably like as far as like breadth of what he touches, I like James Luceno is probably the only one that goes above that level. Where like Timothy Zahn's stories are more high profile individually, but just like Timothy Zahn doesn't really collaborate on other stuff. He's got kind of his own stories, whereas Kevin J. Anderson is like everywhere.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, that's helpful too, for sure. So there's not really much else to talk about on Corellia. It's fun. It's knocked off his repulsor chair. Just like dies. He like falls into the abyss. Oof. Oof.
Everyone's just getting knocked off of beds and sleds in this series. That's a This is definitely a life alert moment.
Well, Palpatine does look like he probably needs a life alert, and that slug looks like he's probably does not have the healthiest BMI. What do you think of the Slave 2, by the way? Sorry.
The Slave 2?
Yeah.
Well, I saw it and I was like, wait, is this the Slave 2? But yeah. I've never liked that because
it's like ditched. Well, I guess it hits the planetary shield, but
yeah. I guess they just didn't want to destroy the Slave 1, or they didn't know if he'd still have it. But I don't like the ship class. It
is weird.
I'd say not my favorite, but I'm going to go all the way and say I actively dislike the Pursuer class.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough.
It looks like half an E-Wing to me.
And then I think he gets a Slave 3, and even a Slave 4, maybe? I can't remember. I know he gets more ships. But
he was difficult to plan for the mod because it's like, okay, how do we want to distribute his ships? Is like, no, he gets the Slave 1 all the time. Screw it.
Well, it seems I can't remember what happens to it, but like back by like Legacy and Fate of the Jedi, he's got the Slave 1.
Yeah. Well, he definitely ends up back with the Slave 1 multiple times because most books just went straight to use it. So it was difficult to get any sort of continuity on when he has what. Where it's probably the kind of thing where he's like Jay Leno, just has a whole bunch of ships.
Boba's Garage.
Yeah. He actually hosts his own late night talk show, and then Conan takes it was a whole thing.
Sounds pretty neat. Anything else you want to talk about with? I almost said Corellia with
Nar Shaddaa.
Yeah. Just a lot of cool imagery there. I like the idea of stealing a ship to get into the deep core. It's pretty
well.
Cool.
The only other thing with that is that they all seem to know roughly where they were going, and they just needed this one access code. Like, oh, okay, we're just kind of following them there, and as if like the deep core was just Biss,
and nobody could warn the New Republic that there's like hundreds of or thousands of ships building.
Well, they're busy with the World Devastators.
I guess I just would have thought
one of the earliest members of the Rebel Alliance now.
But I mean, you'd think that they would have been prepping this invasion for some time.
Well, send a text message. We don't know that they didn't.
That's true.
It looks when Vimana Boda is giving Leia the lightsaber, it looks like she's trying to hand her an iPhone.
Add me on Snapchat.
Well, it looks like a white brick, kind of shaped like an iPhone with the trim, and then at the top left of it, it looks like there's like a USB port on the top, and then an Apple logo. So she's just holding it upside down. I've just been sitting here staring at that for several minutes.
That's pretty funny. I'm looking now too at the picture of Luke commanding the Imperial forces like our father, and it looks nothing like Luke at all. It looks, if you look at that picture, and you would think that's Palpatine for sure.
Every picture of Luke just looks like he's not Luke, except for the cover. The cover with the really funky World Devastator looks like Luke, and then the cover of issue 6, Palpatine has Charlie hair.
I had to send you some text messages I sent Charlie today, just
Okay.
using those things. What do you think of, speaking of planetary shields, what do you think of the hyperspace shenanigans jumping through the planetary shield?
I'm fine with shields acting however they need to act for whatever story. It's very inconsistent, but as long as they say what happened and what we expected to happen, whatever.
In the audio production, when they do that, they go to it's like they go to like another dimension and they talk really slow. They're like, "Oh no, got decalibrated. I'm gonna break apart my molecules." It's just like very like what you'd expect from like an audio production of a Star Wars EU book. This is another cool planet, though. Lots of cool stuff there. The Citadel is cool. The giant probots flying around, the fleet around it.
So one thing that I was slightly confused about with the probots is the giant red thing, whether that was supposed... Because it first comes up in a scene where it's saying, oh, their shielding is reflecting the missiles.
Yeah, that's them getting sucked into the hangar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where at first I was like, oh, is that a hangar? Like, no, they're saying the shield's reflecting it, because if you look at the previous page, it looks like that is just part of the hull, so unless it like turned around, and that's the hangar now. But it did, because it shows up again later, and it does appear to be a hangar. So
yeah, it's like they got in the hangar, and then Nynx, or whatever his name is, hacked into the thing.
It's the Unix system. I know this.
Quick, we got 2 keyboards here. You get one. First thing, download more dedicated WAM.
And as soon as Luke is like turns down the offer to inhabit his body once, and then Palpatine just turns into this giant flare of white air. I must die.
It's like, oh, guess I'll kill myself.
Oh well, this was easy.
This is scene 2 where Luke is choking Han, and Luke's holding him off the ground. I'm like, Mark Hamill's what, like 5'7"?
Yeah,
like
he's not.
He's like 6'8" in this picture. Like, damn. Like, is Luke in Legends playing in the?
Well, it's bigger Luke. The conspiracy.
That's much bigger Luke.
He's basically. I'm trying to decide if he's Cole or Cade in this series. Because he's not Luke. I think we can all agree this is not Luke Skywalker.
Yeah. Hashtag not my Luke.
Don't start.
He's kind of Cade-like. I mean,
because he looks like a legacy Skywalker. Like the design was just repurposed directly for one of them.
I'd say he looks more like Cade, probably, because I think he's kind of got some flow, which Cade has. It's always like over his eyes.
Yeah.
Both of those designs are just awful. Cole and Cade Skywalker, I think both of their designs.
Yeah, I like Rock more than either of them, but not as a Skywalker.
Yeah, no, for sure. I don't know anything else you want to talk about. Let's see. So Leia comes to Biz, says, "Nah, head out." She heads out. They give her R2, another element that's in episode 9. The droid's mind being wiped to facilitate the grand plan. Luke does the force projection. They return back to Dasutka, and then we get to the final issue 6, which brings us the eclipse.
The eclipse, and then takes away the eclipse a page later.
Yeah, it's really sucks, because by the time we get to the Eclipse 2, it's a different artist, and it's just...
Yeah, I don't like the Eclipse 2 anywhere near as much.
No, like the Eclipse 1 is really kind of formidable looking. It's really cool looking, and it gets no time.
No, that's all I had. Like, I think we covered all my notes. I'll just give it one more look.
So in the end, Palpatine's Force Storms, which he's using to destroy the Rebel fleet, not unlike what Palpatine does in Episode 9. Different
Yeah.
kind of force storm. This one doesn't have electricity. It's got space wormholes.
Yeah, I did have two. Okay.
And then basically they break his concentration and he kills himself.
Yeah.
Again. Guess I'll kill myself. What are the other things you want to bring up?
The first one is when Luke is getting lured to the dark side, and Palpatine promises him like all the powers, like the same thing that brought your father over. It's like, no, Anakin wasn't tempted by world devastators. He just wanted to save Padme. Just another like.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Palpatine does kind of tempt him with dark side powers in a way, and
dark side powers, but not control of the fleet. That was
right.
That was very far outside of Anakin's interest.
I guess I'm getting mixed up with the audiobook or the audio production, because in the audio production, Palpatine is very clear. Like, he's like, the dark side is deep powers that only I can teach you.
Yeah, like the way it's presented in here, it's less about Luke getting the dark side powers and more Luke leading the forces, because that's like what Luke's plan is supposed to be. But the other thing is Han and Leia's wedding. Where they mention that, like, they mentioned Mon Mothma officiating, and so I was like, wait, this doesn't sound like the courtship of Princess Leia I know, and then that doesn't sound like the
there's like 3 different weddings, I think. 3 times they get married.
There's one in like a source book. There's the one that happened in courtship, which I always kind of think of as the official one, and then there's this where Mon Mothma was officiating. There's just maybe they just renew their vows every year.
Yeah. Isn't there one at the end of the Jedi Prince series? I think
I canceled my order of them, so I don't know, but there probably is. I think statistically it's
because I think that's how that ends, because Leia almost marries Trioculus,
right.
And then
yeah.
But that, I think that one got written off as being interrupted or something. Very special moment.
It's a tumultuous relationship, but I think the only other notes I have here are Gamorrean two-step, just because that's a fun image, and second time Leia guns. So when they're in the gunner seat, like, oh, I've only done this the one time. It's like, you've done this so many times.
Yeah.
This is one of the weaker parts of earlier EU, where it's like, no matter how long after stuff takes place, they basically act like the characters have been through nothing else.
Yeah.
Like how Luke relates everything back to episode 5 and 6 on in the Thrawn trilogy. It's like, there's some walls beside me. This is like when I went down that canyon that time. Remember that guy? Like, Luke, shut the fuck up.
This is like the time I met Jedi Prince Ken.
Yeah, why can't we get those references?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what to say. I like the new guard designs. There are 2. There's the Sentinels, which are kind of goofy because they're so over the top.
Yeah.
Then there's the Sovereign Protectors, which are also in episode 9 and explicitly called Sovereign Protectors. That's pretty epic.
It's all very steampunky.
Yes, very. Other than that, no. Though I think that's basically it for me. I mean, there's not really a whole lot of plot. Palpatine comes back. He gets a Super Star Destroyer. He's doing lots of mean things. The Super Star Destroyer blows up. You could leave it at that. If Dark Empire 2 wasn't a thing, this would have been basically a complete series. But yeah.
We didn't have too many emails this week, but we did get 2. One person was reminding me, Sonny reminded me that the lightsaber poke note I had from last time was about Mara using the lightsaber tip, which Luke had never considered stabbing anyone before.
Yeah. That's a funny one. She's like, the Emperor taught me to use everything. That's a really advanced skill there, Mara.
And We got an email from Justin, which, I mean, you can bring up whatever you want on the podcast. You don't need to email in, Eck, but...
Because it's my name as well.
Yeah, it's on the screen for everyone right now. For people
Listen,
who aren't...
we've got lots of podcast listeners, bud. So I think of them and I value them.
But didn't you introduce yourself as Justin? Or did you? Maybe not. Either way.
Can we get a new co-host, please? Can I get a new co-host?
Well, you want Charlie on here.
No, Charlie can't read. It's very upsetting.
So, Justin's questions. What is your opinion on the Emperor coming back in the comic, and what do you think? And do you think that is how he came back in Rise of Skywalker? How do you feel about the Dark Empire, the faction as a whole? My opinion is that if it had either the two eclipses or the Galaxy Gun or the World Devastators, I would have found it more believable. I think that Thrawn had known of the Dark Empire, that he would have worked with it. And he does have a question for previous topics, but if you want
to... Let's handle these ones first.
I was going to say
I
that.
like the Dark Empire as a faction. It's a cool idea. I mean, I don't think Palpatine came back this way in The Rise of Skywalker. It seems like he's still in his original body somehow, but we do get the scene of the cloning tanks as well, so it's possible.
Yeah, it seems more like he reconstituted it on Biss, on Exegol.
Yeah. You ever seen the Iron Giant?
No.
Okay, never mind. Well, there's a scene at the end of the Iron Giant where he gets hit by a nuke, and then I think he's destroyed, but then you see it showed earlier that he's got really incredible regenerative powers. So it shows each individual little screw bouncing down the road towards his just towards the central place. So I could just imagine Palpatine's third pube just floating through space.
What if Palpatine was a Jedi?
It's possible.
There we go.
Well, it's not really possible, but
how is it not possible? His great grandmother on his mom's side was a Jedi.
Because he's not made of giant worms.
He kind of is, especially in parts of the original releases, like Episode 6, where his face has that one little section that kind of grossly
made
twitches.
Of a giant worm when he gets knocked out of that cloning tube. I'll tell you that. I'm sorry, I'm just really focused on that scene. I've had it in my head since I first read the comics. Whenever, it's just. But yeah, what do you think of the idea of a resurgent of a new darker empire led by Palpatine?
I think it shows a good contrast with the rest of the empire, where it's this is the distilled gross Sith cult essence, and the rest kind of just continued on with the authoritarian angle, but without the Sith magic. Yeah. So I think it's handled well, and just showing us those two parts of the empire when they're no longer connected, what ends up happening. And there were still dark side cults within the empire, but never obviously the same amount of control that they had with when Palpatine was directly in charge. But yeah.
Yeah, with Dark Empire, I like the idea of Palpatine just and this is mostly stuff in reference books, but I like the idea of him wanting to move past just owning a galaxy. He's he wants total domination of everything everywhere. But it's not it's nuanced or anything.
No, this is Star Wars at its most over the top. Yes. And super weapons I can always live with less. So or fewer.
Yeah, and we've got more to come.
There's just so many of them.
Yeah. Did you say he had other questions about last week as well?
So, on the courtship of Princess Leia, why did the Empire never invade the Hapes cluster to gain access to technology for the gun of command? Seems like something they would have loved.
Hapens were pretty
insular.
Yeah.
It's just too much effort to try to take them over when they're so disconnected.
Yeah. Especially when the rebels start popping up and it's okay, you're gonna need a few sector fleets to go fight the Hapens, and that means that whatever planet those were guarding is now gonna be ripe for a rebel incursion. So they're not aggressive. They kind of just keep to themselves. They don't have that much territory really.
The Hapes cluster is basically the North Sentinel Island of
Yeah,
Star
so
Wars.
just leave
Leave
it
'em alone.
to its own devices, and
Or
kind of
else
like
you'll
similar to
die.
what they did with like the CSA.
Yeah. CSA HUDs. There's a lot of those other areas that were like independent administrative
Mhm.
regions. As long as they weren't really a threat to Palpatine's rule or control over other areas, he
Mhm.
still hadn't completely taken over everything else. Maybe if it had gone on longer, because it had
Mhm.
only been like 20 years that he was in
Yeah,
charge.
yeah, exactly.
Galaxy's a big place.
And was it difficult for ships to get through the veil as well, or
Uh,
the
I think it was just there were hazards, and it was especially just because the Hapens knew how to get around better, and there were a lot of raiders. It's just too
that
much.
Ghostfish does say the Empire did patrol Hapes. That's how Hapes patrol dozen of ISDs.
I'm pretty sure that was mostly outside of the transitory or like the outskirts of it. It was never like within
Yeah,
within
because
actual Hapen
we get
territory.
that the Teshik thing from
Yeah,
Essential Guide to Warfare, and he goes to Hapes task force. And he gets blown the fuck up.
yeah, he's on like an outer Hapen world too. He's not even on.
Oh, is he?
Hapen.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
it's Endalia. I think
Okay.
it is.
I gotta say that scene where he's floating in space and he describes like the battle dragon coming up beneath him is like some of the best imagery
Hmm.
in Star Wars.
I think
That
we've
just
both done
leaves
videos
me-
on that recently.
Yeah, because I'm a bum. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say,
Yeah.
I'm also doing a video on that last part of his first question. Do you think had Thrawn known about the Dark Empire would have worked with it? I don't think he
Yeah,
would have, and I'm doing a video
let's
on
leave
it.
that. Yeah, I don't think so either. I've done kind of a video. I don't think so. I'm excited to see yours though.
We did get emails from Joel where Joel is basically talking about the similarities between Dark Empire and the sequel trilogy, and then the importance of Dark Empire, which I think we've kind of mostly covered. So thanks for the email, Joel, but
Thanks, Joel.
think we covered a lot of these. And then one more email from Mohammed, who noticed something about Kabarak, where the pronunciation, one of the pronunciations you could use with it is Kab. I'm going to do this poorly, but he's saying in Arabic that sounds like the phrase that means to inform or give news. And in the story, Leia said that it would be Kabarak's role to inform the Nobody about the Lady Vader. Nozan has used stand-ins for real-world politics in his novels before, including those in the Middle East, so there's a chance this could have been intentional. If it wasn't, it's still a really cool coincidence.
Sounds like more than just a chance, probably.
Yeah, because there's a lot of stuff that Timothy Zahn does like that, so I'd be more surprised if it was just a coincidence, if that's the case.
Yeah, and the good thing about Timothy Zahn is if you email him, he'll probably answer you.
Yeah. But
yeah,
it feels like it'd feel weird to try to rank this the same way we've done everything else. So,
I was just about to say that. I feel like maybe we'll keep this its own thing. I definitely enjoyed this a lot less than, Thrawn Trilogy. I'm not looking for. I mean, I enjoy them, but
yeah,
I like the idea of Dark Empire a lot more than the execution.
I'm in the same boat. Like I don't hate them. I don't love them. I think there's a lot of cool ideas in here, but some of the execution is just strange. But yeah.
But still, it's fun. I mean, it's a comic. Comics are, I'm not saying that they're lesser art or anything because they're not, but they, I have different expectations when I read most Star Wars comics. The plot moves at different speed. And they get a lot done in this, so.
Yeah, I've never been a huge comic guy, but like I actually like the Legacy comics a bit more than this, just aesthetically.
Yeah.
But
there are definitely better comics. Like the Rogue Squadron comics are better. I think I like the Crimson Empire comics better. We'll cover those at some point, I'm sure, and they tie in with this slightly. So Crimson Empire 1 anyway.
So yeah, I think that's it. I think that's it.
So Corey and I, everyone watching on YouTube right now, or if you're listening on the podcast, here's what you missed out on. Corey and I will be streaming each his new Empire at War mod, Fall of the Republic. I've got links to Corey's channel down in the description, I think. Let me just double check. Yeah, so it's the gaming channel, the second one there. we'll be playing Fall of the Republic, or you can check out my.com/x2. Yeah, thanks everyone for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Not next week, but the week after. Barring any weird scheduling issues, we will be doing Dark Empire 2. Is that still the plan?
Yeah, I'm going to be in my hometown, but I should be able to set up properly with my laptop. I probably won't be able to do face cam like I normally do, which no one's seeing right now on the live stream because you don't have access to that on mine. So,
and then Empire's End is pretty short. Maybe we'll just take a week between that. Well, we can talk about it.
Well, all the comics are fairly short, so
yeah, there's only 2 issues of Empire's End, though, isn't there?
Is there?
I think
it's not as long as the others, but even if it were exactly the same length, this is like an hour read at the most. I think I've read it just 6 times through during the episode.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, there's only 2 issues, so we'll probably just take a week between that, and then we're not sure what we'll do after. We could do Ice Guard's Revenge. We could do Jedi Academy Trilogy. We could go back and maybe do like episode. I think we talked about doing Revenge of the Sith novelization. Maybe we're not sure. So if you guys have any ideas, make sure to send us an email. It is tapcaf transmissions. That's TAPCAF transmissions@gmail.com. Also, if you have any comments about this comic or the next one, leave those as well. And we'll discuss them on stream.
Bye, everyone.
Goodbye.
Something, force be with you.
Force be with you. Hold on. I'm going to spam links to our channels. Let's end the podcast. Let's end the audio portion here.
Yep.